Nova, are you equally excited about our next guest? Bring it on.
Last year has been marked by the COVID-19 pandemic. It has changed the whole world, and even our future. All of us experience dark days. Is there a possibility that we can re-enjoy our summers like they used to be? Our next guest will be able to answer this question with great expertise. Please welcome vaccinologist and professor at the University of Antwerp, Pierre van Damme.
Thank you for joining us today. It's digital. I think in 2020 and 2021, many people will speak digitally. So we are interviewing you via Zoom. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm okay, and good morning to all of you. I'm happy that it was made possible to be in contact with each other, because it was not evident at all. Weeks are tremendously busy, but the digital connection is sometimes a good solution to do a lot in one day. So happy to be with you.
Absolutely, thank you. This is an event about innovation and technology to actually feel better. I think that we're doing it on Zoom today. It's an event from students to students. So I'm going to start with where it all began for you. Was it always a childhood dream to become a doctor?
Yes. and amazingly, I really wanted to become a doctor when I was 5 or 6 years old. And in fact, I wanted to become a surgeon, and a pediatric surgeon. So I really wanted to go for something rather specific. And don't ask me why that specialty at that moment, but I must have had an experience in a hospital probably as a child, and I had a tremendous respect for people there, and that was really my dream. And when I was 17 or 18, I was so happy I could start with this medical education.
And why did you shift then to specialize in infection diseases and vaccinology?
You won't believe me, but my girlfriend, who is still my wife now, she was afraid that if I would become a surgeon, I would never be at home. And I think now she regrets. And we both started as general practitioners in the heart of Antwerp, where at that moment we were experiencing a very tough moment. In fact, speaking about tough moment now, well, it was in 1987, we had too many doctors for the number of patients. And so when you started from zero as a general practitioner, you really had to wait for your patients. So we saw 5 or 6 patients a day, which was not evident to survive. And then we started all kinds of other trainings. So both of us studied occupational health medicine. We did a training in youth medicine. And at the end, I took a job at the university in research on infectious disease. First, just to survive.
Yeah, actually more by accident and out of survival mode.
Right, but at the same time, both of us were, as I said, GPs in the heart of Antwerp in the end of the 80s, and that was the moment of the HIV epidemic. So we had quite a lot of AIDS patients that we were treating with the means we had at that moment, which was not terrific. And I think I was at that moment already quite interested in infectious diseases. I contacted people at the Tropical Institute in Antwerp. We had quite a lot of meetings on infectious disease. And when there was a possibility to start a PhD at the university on infectious disease, I think I didn't have to think twice. This was a kind of good combination of, on the one hand, having some money to survive both of us, but on the other hand, also some interesting area to do research.
Absolutely, and it turned out great. And what kind of student were you? Were you like a real party animal, or more focused on the books and on the the studies of it all?
Well, I'll be very honest. I think the first 3 years I was rather focused on the books because it was all quite new and there was still some pressure from my parents that everything needed to be okay. And then in year 4, I became a party animal. So you saw it also in my scores for the exams, but I will never regret because I was also a student president and very active in organizing all kinds of social activities, not only within the Faculty of Medicine, but also within the whole university. And I will never regret that because that's the way I'll also start to build a network with, I would say, all kind of people in terms of not only medical people or paramedical people, but I have good friends now who are lawyers or who are sociologists or psychologists, and otherwise you would never really meet them, I think, through your medical education. So I'm so happy I did that.
And you're the driving force behind Vaccinopolis. What are the ambitions for Vaccinopolis?
Well, that also started more or less, I would say, I won't say accidentally, but we have been working on vaccine trials for 30 years. And when we were approached by the Gates Foundation to set up a study where the participants were exposed to a new vaccine, but they had to remain in a containment, in quarantine, we thought, well, that's something we really want to do. It's an offer you cannot refuse, so to say. And then we promised that we were able to do that in 6 months. And then we built indeed a container village in less than 6 months. And everyone was surprised. It was a tremendous experience. And then we developed that idea that this is something we need to have not only in a container village for 1 or 2 years, but we need to have that definitely. And so the plan started many years ago. And then at the end, we had a new government. We had to restart all negotiations, but finally it's there. And so now we try to really show Europe, but also the rest of the world, that Belgium can be very attractive for this kind of research. So the building started. Every day I see how fast it goes. And so by the end of 2021, beginning 2022, we will have a building where we can do our clinical trials on the one hand, but where we also will be able to test a number of vaccines on volunteers who will spend some days and maybe some weeks in quarantine. And everyone was saying, oh, this is much too late to test COVID-19 vaccines. Well, I don't know, because maybe we will test new vaccines who will be able to fight the variants and the mutants. So we will need this kind of facilities much more in the future.
Do you think that COVID-19 accelerated the process of making Vaccinopolis ready?
I'm sure for the Belgian government, it fits within their preparedness plan, and it helps people now to think ahead and to look at what do we need if there is a new pandemic, what do we need to go faster in terms of research, in terms of vaccine development, in terms of clinical studies. And that has helped for sure the decision. And we are now still looking for extra funding to finish the whole project. And also there, we see that COVID-19 can be quite helpful to start negotiating better solutions for the building, better solutions for the future.
Because everybody feels, of course, the urge to and the importance of Vaccinopolis. What are the different types of profiles that work at a research unit? Is there, for example, a place for students or student jobs?
Yes, and every Friday we have, for instance, a student working with us here, taking over some of our activities, more administrative activities. But in the summer, we also have students who come here and help us to replace sometimes a lab technician or a nurse or these kind of basic activities. But we also have students who come for their clerkship in terms of training. Biomedical students and medical students, and probably in the future when we will be in the new building, it will be quite attractive also for pharmacy students, maybe also for management students, because of course this is not just doing clinical trials. What is tremendously interesting is the multidisciplinarity that we start to have within our team, and that's more than 50 people now. If you look, you have these biostatisticians, you have modelers, you have infectious disease specialists, but you also have people specialized in psychology, in communication management, and that's really new worlds that go open for each of us, and we learn a lot from each other's competences.
Absolutely. And is Belgium the first country to have such an institution, or are there already other institutions around the world that do the same thing?
Well, to do this kind of containment studies, there are 2 locations in the UK, 3 in the US, and in fact in Europe, one that is really committed to this kind of vaccine trials, there is no one. There is a small department, part of a hospital in the Netherlands, and the same also in Germany, but not one that is fully committed to a permanent facility to do these kind of studies. And that's of course a tremendous advantage, but we plan to work with each other because there is a lack of capacity all over the world. So it's important for us to work with our colleagues in the Netherlands and Germany. And we are starting now also building bridges already with these colleagues in joint projects. And I think we don't have to consider each other as competitors, but rather as collaborators over the borders. And that's, I think, also the spirit of our generation, and probably also your generation, is to look for each other's strong points and to say, okay, we don't have to do exactly the same thing. It's not a Me Too research. We want to do something completely innovative, but very comprehensive to what others haven't been doing so far.
And what are the different stages to develop a vaccine?
Well, as we now all know through the media, you have to start, of course, at the preclinical level, and that's where you start to think about the molecule, where you work in the lab. Then you start to test it in animals, usually in 2 different kinds of animals. And then the next step is really to have your product tested in the human beings, what we call the phase 1 trials. This is always in a very small number of people to check the safety, also to look at the ability to develop protection and antibodies. And once that is done, you can go to a phase 2 trial, and that's already a larger trial where you can test the schedule of a vaccine or the dosage of a vaccine. And when that is done, then you really go to the large phase 3 trials, as we have seen now with 20, 30, 40,000 people. Part of them receive a placebo and part receive then the candidate vaccine. And that's where you really can see whether your vaccine works, whether it protects, and of course, whether it is safe on a large number of people. And it's amazing because now Europe really is also in a way to try to think innovative. And today we will have a kickoff meeting of a European project, which is called Vaccinopolis. And the name is very well found. It's really on vaccines, but how to accelerate the whole conduct of clinical trials. And again, the idea is to work with all sites all over Europe to be able to do studies with 30,000 people, even within Europe. You don't have to go to other continents, but do the whole research here in Europe on a harmonized way with standard operating protocols and so on.
It's fascinating to see how all the countries now are working together to beat COVID-19, but there have already been a lot of viruses before. Why is there a huge need of a research center for vaccines today? Because we've already had so many viruses. Why now today?
Well, what is amazing is, and we have seen that also with the Mexican flu 10 years ago, is that we don't learn from history. And after a while we forget, and we have new governments and we have new people, and we start from scratch again. And the way we are unprepared is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I think companies are much more prepared, and they have business plans for 5, 10, 15 years. I don't think that countries do have that. And that's again a lessons learned here is let's be much better prepared. And also let's have much more attention for prevention and for public health. And we have to be honest, if we look at the training, the medical training in most of the countries in Europe and in the world, it's focused for 95% on therapeutics, on curative medicine. And that means you only start to do something when there is a problem. Mm. And we are trained like that. And in fact, that's no prevention, that's no proactive action. And we should think in another way. We should think, how can I try to be prepared, to be ready if this or that happens? And I hope that the medical education will change and that the mind of the people will change much more in terms of preparedness, whether at European level or Belgian level or Flemish level. This is something that is really needed. If you look at the training on vaccines in the medical curriculum, in some countries it is 0 or 1 hour or 1 day. This is really unbelievable. So we have done a survey with the medical students, the European Medical Student Association, your colleagues, in fact, and they were really surprised to see that in Europe, 30% of the students never heard one word in their medical education about vaccines. And 70% says we do have some knowledge, but it's really a variety of possibilities from 1 hour to 1 day, sometimes 1 week. But in a whole curriculum, that means it's almost nothing. So we have to train people to be much more ready to look at science, to survey, and to really understand what is ongoing in time, so that you can be proactively prepared for the worst, but also for investment, for good choices within your medical organization and public health structure.
Do you think that the timing or the time between different viruses around the world will shorten? Because in the past, like I said, we have already had viruses, but the timing between them was like always a couple of years. Do you think it will shorten now? Because we're always getting with more people on the planet, so we're living closer together. It's easier to spread between people.
I think you're right, and also from a globalization point of view, but also from the point of view that we offer quite a lot of opportunities to viruses to survive easily, to be easily transmittable. We also, with what we are doing now in some countries, like destroying forests and having all these animals coming much closer to the human beings. And so the interaction between animals and human beings, which never occurred before, is on the one hand dangerous, but in particular in the transmission of what we call zoonosis. So I would say viruses that normally only would live in the animal population starts now to expose us as humans to new viruses. And that's something we really have to be careful and to think about, what are we doing here? This has never been the objective. And this has to do, of course, with quite a lot of evolutions in terms of forest management on the one hand, but also management of traveling, management of population demographics. So this is really a turning point where people have to think about, what are we doing on the long term?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how we'll be able to protect yourself, indeed. What was your first thought when you heard about the outbreak of COVID-19 in Wuhan?
I think, like many of my colleagues, that we have completely underestimated that situation, to be honest. When we heard that in January, we thought, oh, this will be managed locally. In particular, when we saw how China was organizing itself, it was like they take quite important measures, so it will stay there. And also because if we looked at the previous epidemics of MERS and SARS-CoV-1, that was also rather limited geographically. All of us were suddenly, I think, shaken by the images of Italy. And then you start to realize this is unbelievable. So it's coming over to Europe in 1 week time, and then you see what a devastating situation it is in Italy. And then you really say, now it's something that we have to address urgently.
Mm-hmm. I think everybody underestimated it. For myself, when they were said, like, you have to go in lockdown for 3 weeks, I thought, like, okay, 3 weeks sitting on a couch and then we'll be past it. Now we're 1 year later. The whole world is now focusing on COVID-19. Does it mean that other diseases fall to the background, such as cancer treatments for these diseases? Is there a danger?
Well, that was absolutely the situation, I would say, in the first lockdown. And then you see that this virus has also quite some collateral damage, not only mentally or psychologically, but also, I would say, in terms of postponed treatment or underdiagnosis of some diseases. And this was really a, how should I say, a attention point during the second lockdown, that the medical service for cancer patients, but for some other activities, psychiatric activities, mental health activities, youth health, had to be completely restored somehow. And I think that's where we really have to pay attention, is what happens with the other pathology, because we have much more than only COVID-19. And within the medical world, tremendous efforts are done now to keep, I would say, hospitals open, to keep practices open, GP practices open for everything. And it's important that we continue to say to people, don't stay home with your complaints or with what you feel. Come to the practice and you need to be treated. The risk capacity for that, I think there has been a tremendous effort to keep everything open, I think, since the first lockdown. Let's use it, because that's our duty also within the society, is to have attention, at least I would say, for other things than COVID-19.
And do you think that a lockdown as we know it today will happen again in the near future, or something else?
I think that we try to manage a very difficult balance by trying to offer some perspective to the population on the one hand, and not to be too strict on the other hand. If we compare the situation for the moment in Belgium, we all know it's not super. We have a very high plateau of daily infections. We can hardly get it down. That's a problem. On the other hand, the schools are almost open, all open, with some exceptions for some students. We have, the shops are open. The telework is not doing very well in Belgium. But if we compare that with some other countries where the schools are still completely closed, where shops are only open in some situations, I think this is something that people should understand, that we are looking for a very fragile balance, but so far we do it. And what you start to see, and because you're interested in innovation, what you start to see is that also medically, we start to think much more in an innovative way. So how can we keep the patient, for instance, at home, but still get some samples from the patient? Okay. So, and this is something that we are triggered to do so and to think so because of COVID-19. So now we can send, for instance, devices to the patient. They can put some saliva or urine in a device. They can send it to the lab and we can get the results, and they don't have to come to the practice, or they don't have to be exposed, I would say, to other patients. So also there we start to live with the COVID-19 situation, and that avoids, I would say, more strict measures, but allows to further follow up medically a large number of people.
Okay, and how did it feel to become a very known figure, a public figure during the COVID-19 crisis?
You don't notice, to be honest. It's from the one day in the other, and you only start to notice when suddenly you say, okay, I have a moment to walk with my wife through Antwerp or at the seacoast, and then she says, Pierre, you have been spotted. and that's really amazing. But I try not to pay too much attention to it, because otherwise you can't come outside anymore. But clearly, of course, you see that at your mailbox. You hear that from your neighbors. When you go to a takeout restaurant or a takeaway restaurant, they want to have a photograph with you because you ordered some meals there. So it's a funny chapter in my life on the one hand. On the other hand, I know this is very temporary, and by the end of the year, probably it will be over. So I also enjoy, let's say, the few moments that I have to look at that. Yeah.
Okay. You are a vaccinologist and also a professor at the University of Antwerp. Do you also see yourself as an entrepreneur?
I think so. If you start back in the 80s when I started my PhD here, and I did my first clinical trial in 87, 88, at that moment we did, or I did everything myself. In the meantime, I created a team of easily 50 people with nurses and lab personnel, with contacts with a large number of companies to do clinical trials. We try to attract grants from international societies and organizations. So that means you need to organize yourself, but also to look at the international and national situation and see where is there a niche to do research and to move on. And I think with infectious disease and with vaccines, we found a very important niche in Antwerp. We create now quite a lot of contacts with the Tropical Institute, with other colleagues within the university and outside the university to really have this kind of ecosystem here in Antwerp on infectious disease. And that is still rather unique. And I believe that we can continue like that for a while. And then, of course, much more connect internationally. But everywhere there is an opportunity, I think. We have been working now, for instance, this year with 2 large occupational health departments. We have never done that before. And again, these are ideas, and then you start to meet people. And then I say, oh, we look for more than 1,000 participants for a phase 3 trial. Are you willing to participate? And at the end, we are doing the trial with these 2 occupational health departments, and they are so happy that they can join research, because it's not the real routine for them. For us, it's a fantastic win-win situation, because they can recruit a large number of participants. And I know this is not only for COVID-19, this is again a new idea that we can develop. And in the meantime, we have a satellite research center in Bosnia, in Sarajevo, also just by accident, because they wanted to start clinical trials. And we said, okay, we want you to assist you and to help you. And so it's hard to say no to a number of things. Maybe that's my problem. But I wouldn't do it if I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. But you need to love this kind of new initiatives and new ideas. Yeah.
You need to love what you do.
Absolutely. I think that's for everyone very important. What kind of job you do, what kind of studies you do, you need to like it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have 2 more questions left before we round up. What's your outlook on the future? What will the future look like?
For myself or for all of us?
For yourself and also for COVID-19.
Well, I hope I will have some more sleep hours and rest in the future. But I start to think about, okay, what after the age of 65? Of course, I'm 61 now. So I have 4 years to prepare those who will have to take over. And I like that. I'm looking now for the strength among all my colleagues who take over part of my activities, so that I'm sure I can rest in peace, so to say, that the research, the ideas, the opportunities for the future, that they all will be taken over by a number of people. And I see my role then much more as a coach, and perhaps in Belgium or elsewhere to try to assist as much as possible others who take over this kind of research. That's more or less what I hope, and have some more time for my wife and my kids in the future. But that will still be probably 2022, I suppose. But they know that. And I think for all of us to really enjoy what you do at each moment in your life. But also to take sometimes the needed rest, to do some self-reflection, and to take time to plan things, to look backwards, but also to look forward and to learn a lot from what happened so far.
Okay, and you said it a bit already, but have you any last words of advice for our students?
Well, they have everything they need to have, which is energy and health, and a whole life just in front of them. So they need to realize that this is just one event where we can all learn from it, but they don't need to stay there. They need to think ahead. and really take everything they have in terms of energy to look forward, to plan, and not have this whole COVID-19 influence of have too much impact on their life or on their contact with friends. So stay in contact with each other. I think that is tremendously important. Whether it is virtual or not, don't be on your own and alone. Try to open your windows, open your door, try to take some fresh air, mentally and physically and literally, and look forward and have a lot of confidence in the future and in each other. That's important.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Pierre, and for making time in your overly busy schedule. So thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck with the Vaccinopolis, with the opening of Vaccinopolis for the next coming year, and also the best of health. Thank you.
Thank you. And we should invite you to the opening of Vaccinopolis, you and your team. And I would say continue like that and have a lot of success with your initiatives.
Thank you.